what happens when a society completely forgets its own core
This
values?
is a terrifying question.
Right. And I don't mean because of, like, an invading army coming in.
Or someone burning all the history books in the town square.
Exactly. I mean, what happens when it occurs through this slow, silent, almost imperceptible linguistic rebranding?
Just a gradual shift in the dictionary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Today, we are looking at a scenario where the words a culture uses stay exactly the same, but the underlying meanings of those words completely flip.
Which is so disorienting.
It is. You still use the word freedom, but functionally, I mean, it means compliance. You still use the word truth, but practically it just means whatever the loudest person in the room is shouting.
Right.
So if the labels on the outside remain totally untouched, how long would it take for you to realize that the substance inside is entirely gone?
I mean, it's a genuinely unsettling thought experiment
It really is.
because it completely relies on our inherent desire for, the comfort of familiarity. We trust the labels we've grown up
You
with.
just take them for granted.
Exactly. Human beings naturally want things to be recognizable and easily categorized.
Yeah.
But when you apply that lens to the mechanics of historical sociology,
Yeah.
or specifically to religious evolution, that comfort just vanishes.
Completely evaporates.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you start looking at a landscape of human belief that is incredibly malleable, and you see how easily foundational truths can be inverted without anyone sounding the alarm.
And that silent inversion is exactly what we are getting into on today's deep dive.
Yes, we are.
We have a deeply provocative, unapologetic text on the table today. It's an Arabic work titled Athar al-Shirk fi al-Muslimin.
Which roughly translates to Traces of Polytheism and the Crisis of Ignorance.
Right. And our mission today is to thoroughly unpack this author's intensely sociological and theological critique.
It's a heavy one.
It's so heavy. He is looking at how a slow creep of historical ignorance can lead entire societies to silently revert to ancient forms of idolatry.
All while hiding under the safe, comfortable guise of new terminology.
Yes, exactly. But before we get into it, I know you wanted to lay down some ground rules.
Yeah, I think it's vital we set up some guardrails for you, the listener.
Definitely.
The text we are examining makes some very aggressive, very specific theological claims regarding religious practices in certain parts of the Islamic world.
It pulls no punches.
It really doesn't. So, as your guides on this deep dive, we are absolutely not endorsing or validating these viewpoints.
Right. We're not taking sides here.
Not at all. We aren't taking sides in any sectarian or religious debate. Our role here is purely educational and analytical.
Just laying out the facts of the text.
Exactly. We want to impartially map out the author's arguments, trace the architecture of his logic, and examine his sociological observations.
So you can understand how he believes societies change, degrade, and basically deceive themselves.
Precisely.
I really appreciate you setting that baseline because looking at the premise of this text, it's easy to see how explosive it is.
Oh, absolutely.
The whole thing rests on this core idea of an information vacuum. The author starts by painting this picture of what happens when a nation loses its true, authentic scholars and guides.
And it isn't just a matter of people suddenly having no one to answer their questions.
No, it's about what rushes in to fill that empty space.
What's fascinating here is how he describes that dynamic. Because nature abhors a vacuum, right?
And human society might abhor it even more.
Exactly. When educated, principled guides disappear, the people who actually understand the rigorous roots and the strict definitions of a belief system.
The space doesn't just sit empty.
No, it is rapidly, almost violently backfilled. The text describes this process beautifully. It states that clouds of ignorance begin to accumulate over the minds of the masses.
Clouds of ignorance. That's such a striking visual.
It is. Bad customs take root because there's literally no intellectual immune system left to fight them off.
Wow. No immune system.
Right. And most importantly, people become highly susceptible to fantasies.
And there is never, ever a shortage of opportunists ready to capitalize on that susceptibility.
Ever.
The author calls them greedy scholars, deceitful guides, and outright charlatans.
They just step right into the void.
When the true scholars fade out, these individuals step right up to the microphone. But what is so compelling is how they operate.
It's very systematic.
Yeah, they don't just walk in and demand money or blind loyalty right away. They use very specific, calculated tactics.
Right. Beginning with claiming to have hidden mystical powers to actually control the universe or manipulate the unseen.
The methodology is just fascinating. They weaponize ambiguity.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
The text highlights how these charlatans rely on incredibly vague, ambiguous statements. Like, there is a specific quote in the text where followers will recount an experience by simply saying, "My master so-and-so brought the news."
That's it. Just that.
That's it. It's just a vague, generic pronouncement.
It sounds a lot like the psychological trick used in cold reading, right?
Yeah.
Like what a stage psychic does.
It is the exact same mechanism. When a charlatan speaks in calculated ambiguities, they aren't actually providing any real information.
No, they are handing the follower a blank canvas.
Exactly. The author argues that the listener will take those vague words and project their own internal desires, their own deep-seated fears onto them.
And their own hoax, too.
Right. The follower is doing all the heavy cognitive lifting. They convince themselves, the master truly has knowledge of the unseen.
When in reality, the master just offered a generic platitude.
And the follower's own mind furiously filled in the blanks.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit, because I think there is a profound modern parallel here.
Oh, I'd love to hear it.
It's essentially the same mechanism as an algorithm on social media. Think about it.
Okay, yeah.
When verified, reliable, nuanced information is removed from your feed doesn't just stay blank.
The screen doesn't go white.
Exactly. It immediately, instinctively backfills with the most highly engaging, emotionally resonant content available.
Which is almost universally conspiracy theories, clickbait, and fantasy.
Right. The algorithm abhorring a vacuum is exactly like human society abhorring a vacuum of leadership. The system will always find a way to keep you engaged, even if the content is completely toxic.
That analogy actually isolates the mechanism perfectly.
It makes it so clear.
It is a system-seeking equilibrium, but finding it in the lowest common denominator of sensationalism, rather than the rigor of truth.
And the text actually grounds this sociological observation in foundational Islamic theology.
Right. He uses historical texts to prove this.
Yes, to prove his point about this generational vacuum, the author brings in a highly significant hadith from the authoritative collections of Sahih Bukhari and Muslim.
Narrated by Abdullah bin Amr bin Alas, right?
Correct.
This is the tradition that explains exactly how knowledge disappears. It's not a sudden catastrophic event.
No, the hadith explicitly states that God doesn't just magically snatch knowledge out of the minds of the people.
It's not a sudden divine amnesia that falls over a city.
Exactly. Rather, knowledge disappears when the scholars die out. It is an organic, generational attrition.
It's just a slow fade.
Yeah. The hadith continues to say that when there is not a single true scholar left, the people will take ignorant leaders for themselves.
And then what happens?
These leaders will be asked questions, and they will issue fatwas, which are religious decrees, without any actual knowledge.
Wow.
The result is that they will be led astray, and they will lead others astray.
Let me push back on the author's premise for a second, though.
Sure, go ahead.
Does he suggest that the masses are actively complicit in this? Like, do they want to be deceived because the truth is too difficult or too demanding?
That's a great question.
Or are they just tragic victims of circumstance who genuinely don't know any better?
Well, from the author's perspective, it is primarily framed as a systemic, catastrophic failure of education.
Okay.
When the baseline of religious literacy drops below a certain threshold, the general public simply loses the cognitive tools required for critical discernment.
They just can't tell the difference anymore.
Exactly. They aren't waking up and maliciously choosing to be deceived. They are operating in an environment where the counterfeit currency of these charlatans is the only currency in circulation.
So over a few generations, they literally don't know what the real thing looks like.
Right. Which sets up what is arguably the most explosive argument in the entire source material.
Absolutely.
Because once this vacuum is filled and the counterfeit currency becomes the standard, it completely alters the language of the society.
Yes, the author starts drawing a direct comparison between two completely different historical eras.
And it's based entirely on the semantics of idolatry.
It is a deeply uncomfortable comparison for the modern believers he is addressing.
Highly uncomfortable.
He looks at the ancient pre-Islamic era of ignorance, what is known in Arabic as the Jahiliyyah, and places it side by side with the modern era of these followers.
And the basis of his critique is purely linguistic. He's essentially attacking their use of the dictionary.
Yeah, he argues that the pre-Islamic Arabs, despite being entrenched in polytheism and absolute religious ignorance, possessed one redeeming quality.
Which was?
They were masters of eloquence, and they were completely honest with their vocabulary. They called things by their exact, precise names.
Right, so if an ancient Arab bowed down to a statue carved out of wood or stone, they looked at that statue and called it an Ilah.
A god.
Exactly. They didn't play word games.
Right.
They owned the terminology of their actions.
But the text argues that the modern followers have suffered a catastrophic linguistic
The
deterioration.
vocabulary has degraded.
Yes. The author's thesis is that these modern people engage in the exact same fundamental behaviors as the ancients.
Submitting to, fearing, and revering entities other than the one God.
Exactly. But they violently refuse to use the accurate terminology for what they are doing.
They completely reject the label.
Let's look at the specific terms the author calls out here. Because instead of calling someone a god, the modern followers will revere a human figure and call them Al-Goth.
Which means the helper.
Right. Or Al-Queto, which means the pole.
Implying they are the axis around which the spiritual universe spins.
It's wild. They will claim these individuals have Kash, which is the unveiling of the unseen.
Or Tazrif, which literally translates to the power to control or dispose of the affairs of the universe.
When you look at the psychological weight of those terms, the emotional reality of the relationship becomes so clear.
It really does.
The author zeroes in on how these followers submit to these aliyah, these saints or holy men. They fear them with an intensity that is equal to, or sometimes even greater than, their fear of God himself.
But the crux of the author's frustration is that they absolutely refuse to call these saints gods.
Vehemently refuse.
And they refuse to call their acts of ultimate submission and fear worship.
Because to use the word worship would legally and socially condemn them within the framework of Islam.
So they just changed the label to escape the legal ruling.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This feels exactly like a corporate rebrand.
Oh, for sure.
Think about walking down the aisle of a grocery store. You pick up a box of cookies and you read the ingredients.
Always a scary experience.
Right. The food industry knows that modern consumers have been trained to be terrified of the word sugar.
So what do?
They remove the word sugar from the label and they replace it with organic evaporated cane juice.
Or agave nectar.
Exactly. But it's the exact same biochemical substance.
Your body processes it the exact same way. It spikes your insulin the exact same way.
Right. The physical reality of the substance has not changed one iota. Only the ink on the packaging has changed.
That's a brilliant way to look at it.
The author is essentially arguing that these spiritual followers are consuming pure, unadulterated polytheism. But because the label says reverence for the righteous saints, they think they are eating health food.
That's a highly effective way to visualize his critique. He is attacking their semantic gymnastics.
Semantic gymnastics, I love that phrase.
From his strict orthodox lens, a change in vocabulary does not alter the metaphysical reality of the action.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate here.
Okay.
Because if you sat down with one of these modern believers, they would fiercely defend their intent.
They absolutely would.
They would say, look, I know this saint isn't the creator. I know God made the universe. I'm just asking this saint for a little help.
Right, using them as an intermediary.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How does the author counter that argument of intent?
Well, this is where the text transitions from a sociological observation into a rigorous systematic theological dismantling.
He goes straight for the jugular.
He really does. The author anticipates that exact defense. He knows the followers claim they are fundamentally different from the ancient polytheists because the ancients worshipped actual rocks.
Whereas the modern believers claim they are just seeking blessings from righteous people.
Right. It's the defensive delegation.
The defensive delegation, what does that mean exactly?
The modern believers argue, we do not believe these saints rival God in the initial act of creation. What we believe is that God delegated certain powers to these righteous people. They believe God handed over the keys to the warehouse, essentially.
Wow.
They argue that these saints have been given the delegated power to benefit or harm, to control the rain, to heal the sick.
And the text mentions something very specific about children too, right?
Yes, to grant people male or female children, or to strike someone with infertility if the saint is angered.
Those are massive cosmic claims to attach to a human being.
And that is exactly the author's uncompromising rebuttal. He forces the reader to stop and rigorously define what divinity actually is.
What does it mean to be a god?
Exactly. The text argues that attributing absolute, cosmic, universe-altering powers, like the control over life, death, fertility, and forces of nature, to a created human being is the very definition of deification.
So his point is that the mechanism by which you claim they got the power is entirely irrelevant.
Exactly. If you treat a human being as the ultimate source of your reign, your health, and your children, you have deified them, period. It does not matter if you claim they received that power via delegation.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of whatever semantic gymnastics or evaporated cane juice words you use to dodge the legal ruling of polytheism, the functional reality is identical to worship.
The irony he points out here is just staggering.
It really is.
You have a population that is totally ignorant of both the strict legal definitions of theology and the linguistic definitions of their own vocabulary.
Double ignorance.
Yes. And because of this double ignorance, they comfortably walk around considering themselves pure Orthodox Sunni Muslims.
Simply because some local Sufi sheikh or emir a spiritual leader, pats them on the head and signs off on their behavior.
It creates a self-authenticating closed loop.
Exactly. The charlatan redefines the terms to justify his own power.
The follower accepts the redefined terms because it offers them a tangible intermediary.
And then the charlatan gives the follower a certificate of orthodoxy based entirely on those fake terms.
And it seems the author is adamant that this isn't some new, unique, modern problem.
No, he brings in a lot of philosophical and sociological backing to prove this is a recurring historical trap.
He relies heavily on the concept of established historical patterns, right?
Yes, he quotes the Quran, specifically Surah Al-Faf, verse 23, which says, "That is the sunnah of Allah, which has occurred before, and you will not find any change in the sunnah of Allah."
What does sunnah of Allah mean in this context?
In this theological context, it refers to the divine laws of history, the established, unbreakable patterns of how societies rise, fall, and repeat their mistakes.
He also pulls in secular sociology to support this.
He does. He cites sociologists who state the famous maxim, history repeats itself.
And logicians, too.
Right. He quotes logicians who operate on the principle that what applies to a thing applies to its like.
Meaning,
Meaning, if the ancient Arabs engaged in behavior X, and it was universally defined as polytheism,
and modern people engage in the exact same behavior X.
it must inherently be called polytheism. The label cannot change the reality of the action.
So, what does this all mean? Taking all of that in the Quranic quotes, the sociology, the logic, is the author suggesting that humanity is just perpetually trapped in an endless, depressing historical loop.
It's a dark thought.
If human psychology constantly, across thousands of years, defaults to wanting a physical, tangible intermediary, a shrine you can touch, a man you can hand a coin to, rather than an abstract, unseen God.
Is the fight for pure monotheism just a doomed uphill battle against human nature itself?
Exactly.
Well, the text certainly portrays the preservation of pure monotheism as an arduous, perpetual struggle.
Think about the psychological demands of pure, unadulterated monotheism.
They are immense.
It requires an immense amount of abstract thought, intense spiritual discipline, and the ability to delay gratification.
It requires you to pray to an unseen entity with no immediate physical proof and trust the unseen result.
And human nature, conversely, is terrified of the unseen.
We want guarantees. We want a receipt.
We want to hand a gold coin to a man in a robe and have him look us in the eye and say, "Your harvest will be bountiful."
What the author is diagnosing is the constant grinding tension between the rigorous, abstract demands of divine revelation and the lazy, tactile comfort of human superstition.
And that profound human desire for a receipt, for something tactile, is exactly how this abstract theology bleeds out into the physical world.
Yes.
Because the author doesn't just keep this as a philosophical debate about the dictionary. He tracks how this bad theology rapidly metastasizes into the economic realities of a society.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is where the text shifts from theology to a fiercely critical economic analysis.
It's all about the money.
The author outlines the sheer, undeniable commodification of religion. Once a society collectively establishes that these specific human intermediaries hold the literal keys to cosmic power.
To health, wealth, and fertility.
Right. It's no longer just about a quiet, personal belief in someone's heart. It instantly transforms into a massive, lucrative economy built entirely on shrines, tombs, and the brokering of hidden powers.
The imagery he uses to describe this economy is incredibly vivid.
It paints quite a picture.
He talks about massive, exorbitant wealth being siphoned away from productive societal uses just to build these elaborate, glittering domes and shrines over the graves of the dead.
And then you have throngs of people undertaking these incredibly arduous, expensive, exhausting journeys just to visit them.
It becomes an explicitly transactional system.
The text mentions the existence of what are called dar al-daman, which translates literally to houses of guarantee.
Houses of guarantee. That name alone tells you everything you need to know about the psychology at play here.
It is exactly what it sounds like. The text describes how people literally purchase guarantees of spiritual safety, or physical protection against calamity, or even ultimate salvation in the afterlife.
Using cold, hard cash.
They're buying an insurance policy from a spiritual broker.
Reading this, you can't help but think of the sale of indulgences in medieval Europe that sparked the Protestant Reformation.
The parallel is striking.
It's the exact same economic model. You had the Catholic Church selling pieces of paper that promised to shave a few thousand years off your time in purgatory.
The blatant monetization of grace.
Exactly. And it was that exact economic exploitation of the peasants' visceral fear of hell that sparked Martin Luther's outrage.
The author here is identifying the exact same economic cancer, just operating in a different geographic and theological context.
And the author digs deeper into the deeply entrenched social hierarchy this economy inevitably creates.
He talks about the societal reverence for lineages of Mirabaidini.
Who are they?
These are specific families or tribal lines who are believed to possess mystical powers and unquestionable authority strictly by birthright.
So it has nothing to do with merit.
Absolutely nothing to do with their personal scholarship, their piety, or their moral character. It is pure spiritual nepotism.
Which leads directly to the most jarring moral paradox that the author points out.
This part is wild.
He notes that because of this spiritual nepotism, you have individuals who are described as permissive, which is the author's polite, understated way of saying they are deeply immoral.
They openly sin, they brazenly break the established laws of the religion.
And yet they are completely sanctified, protected, and fiercely defended by the masses.
Simply because they belong to a certain holy lineage or hold a title in a specific Sufi order.
The text also highlights the Zardat, right?
The Zardat, these are massive, sprawling festivals or feasts held in the name of the local saints.
And the author points out the incredibly dark irony of these gatherings.
Under the protective, unquestionable veil of spirituality and honoring the saint, every single religious taboo and moral prohibition is openly violated.
It becomes a carnival of transgression.
But it is all culturally subsidized by the collective belief that the saint's overarching blessing makes it all acceptable.
But I really need to challenge this, because from the outside, it seems baffling.
It's hard to wrap your head around.
How does the text explain the followers' profound cognitive dissonance? How do they see a supposedly holy man doing completely unholy, explicitly illegal things and still give him their money?
How does the human brain not just break under that contradiction?
Yes.
To understand that, you have to understand the concept of barakat, which means blessings or spiritual energy.
Okay, barakat.
The author explains that when a society has been conditioned for generations to believe that all salvation, all physical health, and all economic prosperity flow exclusively through these specific individuals.
Their critical faculties simply shut down.
Exactly. The terror of losing the barakat, the absolute paralyzing fear of angering the man who supposedly controls the rain in the womb, overrides everything.
It overrides their logic.
It overrides their understanding of religious law, and it overrides what they are seeing with their own two eyes.
It's very similar to the psychology of a high control group or a cult.
The follower's entire reality is dependent on the leader's approval, so they will rationalize any behavior to maintain that safety.
The text argues this fear is so pervasive, so deeply rooted, that it hasn't just corrupted the culture.
It has actually hijacked the foundational pillars of the Islamic faith itself.
And this brings us to what I see as the absolute analytical climax of this deep dive.
This is where he really lays it all out.
He goes straight for the jugular here. The text argues that the 5 pillars of Islam, which are the undisputed foundational core of the religion, the absolute non-negotiables, have been entirely hollowed out.
From a distance, they look exactly the same, but the internal wiring has been completely severed from God and redirected toward these human spiritual leaders.
The author is incredibly meticulous in this section. He doesn't just make a sweeping, generalized accusation.
No, he walks the reader step by step through a rigorous breakdown of each individual pillar.
Let's walk through them, starting with the first pillar, the Shahada, the fundamental declaration of faith.
There is no God but God.
Right. The text argues that these followers will enthusiastically say these words with their tongues. They recite the formula perfectly.
But when a moment of actual crisis hits, when their child falls violently ill, or their crops are failing and they are facing starvation,
Their actual reliance, their profound fear, and their instinctive panic are directed entirely toward the saints.
The words say God, but in the dark night of the soul, the heart screams for the Goth.
The declaration just becomes an empty cultural reflex rather than a metaphysical reality.
And then he moves to the second pillar, Sala, the daily ritual prayers.
The author notes that they will stand and pray to God, but they do it mechanically.
Completely devoid of kushu.
Let's define kushu for the listener because it's a critical concept here.
Kushu is that deep, trembling reverence, profound humility, and absolute presence of heart that is legally and spiritually supposed to be reserved exclusively for standing before the Creator.
Right, it's the physiological and emotional manifestation of awe.
The author observes that they have absolutely no kushu when they pray to God. They might even be yawning or distracted.
But watch those exact same individuals when they're standing before their local spiritual leader, the human being they're seeking blessings from.
Suddenly, their entire body language transforms.
They are trembling, their eyes are downcast, they're speaking in hushed tones.
They are exhibiting ultimate, intense reverence. They are taking the kushu that rightfully belongs to God and giving it entirely to a man.
Is the physical misdirection of worship.
And then we reach the third pillar, zakat, the obligatory, legally mandated charity.
This is where the author's economic critique comes roaring back.
He highlights a fascinating, highly specific behavioral contradiction.
These followers are notoriously stingy and evasive when it comes to paying their actual Islamic charity, right?
Yes, the wealth tax that is supposed to be distributed to the poor, the orphans, and the destitute in their own community.
They drag their feet, they look for legal loopholes, they complain about the burden.
But, and this detail absolutely blew my mind, they will rigorously, enthusiastically enforce completely unauthorized offerings to the shrines.
The author gives a highly specific historical example here. The exact mandatory grain measures dedicated to Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani.
They will actively shortchange the starting orphans in their own town. But they will never, ever fail to send the precise measurement of grain to the shrine of a saint who died centuries ago.
Why? Why do they do that?
Because the psychology of barakat we discussed earlier is at play. They believe the saint's curse will literally ruin their harvest if they miss a payment.
So the invented superstitious law has completely overwritten and erased the divine law in their minds.
It's the weaponization of spiritual extortion.
Let's keep moving through the pillars. The fourth pillar, Psalm, fasting during the holy month of Ramadan.
This one is wild.
How on earth do they subvert something as universal and globally standardized as Ramadan?
By hijacking the authority of time itself.
Explain that.
The text states that these specific communities will deliberately ignore the legally mandated, astronomically observable moon sightings that dictate the start and end of Ramadan.
So they ignore the standard the whole global Islamic community uses.
Instead, they prefer to start their fasts and break their fasts based entirely on the arbitrary personal commands of their local spiritual leaders.
So the leader's spoken word completely supersedes the physical reality of the moon.
Exactly. And the physical hypocrisy the author points out here is just, wow.
He notes that these same people will complain endlessly about the hunger, the thirst, and the physical toll of fasting for God during Ramadan.
They act like it's a massive, unbearable, exhausting burden.
But those exact same individuals will happily endure absolute starvation, blistering thirst, and agonizing physical conditions while traveling on foot for weeks to visit the shrines of these looters.
Because again, the social and psychological reward of visiting the shrine is tangible. It is immediate.
They get the social status of having completed the visit.
And they feel the immediate psychological relief of having secured the barakat. Fasting purely for the unseen God requires an abstract, mature faith they no longer possess.
Which leads directly to the subversion of the fifth and final pillar, Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca.
The ultimate journey of a Muslim's life, stripping away worldly status to stand equal before God.
How is that subverted?
The text argues that these followers rarely undertake the actual journey to Mecca. They view it as too far, too difficult, and spiritually too abstract.
So what do they do instead?
They replicate the sacred rituals locally. They perform tawaf, the act of circumambulation, walking in circles.
Which, in Islamic law, is an act of worship strictly reserved for the Kaaba in Mecca.
Right. But they do it around the local shrines and tombs. Furthermore, they establish specific, rigid seasons and dates for these local visits.
Directly mimicking the sacred months of Hajj.
And here is the kicker. The ultimate semantic math equation that shows how deep this delusion goes.
Yeah, this part is unbelievable.
The author says these communities have even calculated, socially, that a certain number of visits to the local shrine mathematically equals one accepted Hajj to Mecca.
They have literally created a spiritual exchange rate for salvation.
It is the complete localization, domestication, and ultimate commodification of a universal monotheistic faith.
I mean, looking at this comprehensive breakdown of the 5 pillars, this isn't just a misinterpretation of a few obscure verses.
Not at all.
This is a complete, top-to-bottom, hostile takeover of the religion's operating system.
The original code is gone.
And this new, localized, monetized code is running everything. But I have to ask, how does the author frame the culpability here?
What do you mean?
Does he view this as a malicious, smoky backroom conspiracy by these leaders? Like, are these charlatans sitting at a table together mapping out how to steal the religion?
Or does he see this as just the tragic, organic, inevitable endpoint of generations of unchecked ignorance?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, the author absolutely views it as a systemic, organic disease. It is the natural pathology of ignorance.
So no grand conspiracy.
He doesn't necessarily need to believe in a grand unified conspiracy of charlatans meeting in secret, because the mechanism of societal decay is highly predictable.
Remove true knowledge, and the system naturally rots from the inside out.
Exactly. The charlatans aren't the root cause. They are just the opportunistic symptoms of the rot.
The disease itself is the absence of truth.
And this organic systemic rotting leads directly to the final and perhaps most devastating argument of the entire text.
Right, because bad theology doesn't just stay neatly confined inside the mosque or the shrine.
It leaks out.
It infects the streets, the markets, and the government. If the religion's operating system is entirely hijacked to funnel money and power to a few saints, how does that not immediately corrupt the local town hall?
It definitely does. This brings us to the author's final sociological diagnosis: inverted realities and societal collapse.
This raises what is perhaps the most important question for a sociologist looking at religion.
What is the actual tangible link between metaphysical superstition and the practical health of a civic society?
The text asserts, unequivocally, that without true, rigorous knowledge to correct core beliefs, there is absolutely no foundation left to inspire civic virtue.
When the general public is conditioned from birth to only recognize innovation, charlatanism, and blind obedience, they completely lose the capacity for independent moral thought.
The author says they view the blind glorification of their ancestors and their local saints as their highest possible calling.
Which drains all their energy away from building a functional, just society.
And when all your societal energy, all your wealth, and all your reverence is poured into kissing the hand of a corrupt leader and walking in circles around a tomb,
the actual practical virtues that build a strong society completely collapse.
The author provides this chilling list of inverted realities. He essentially says the dictionary of human virtue has been flipped upside down.
And it's crucial we look at the specific mechanisms of how these inversions happen, rather than just listing them.
Exactly. Let's break a few of these down. The author says that in this degraded society, glory is equated with tyranny.
How does that happen?
Well, if a society truly believes that a specific spiritual leader has arbitrary cosmic power delegated by God,
the power to strike someone dead or ruin a harvest.
Right, then any tyrannical action that leader takes is viewed not as a crime, but as a manifestation of divine right.
Cruelty becomes a sign of immense spiritual power.
Therefore, the more tyrannical a leader is, the more glorious and terrifying his barakat must be.
That makes total terrifying sense. Here's another one. Security is viewed as cowardice.
Think about the psychology of the houses of guarantee.
Oh.
If you have purchased a spiritual insurance policy from a saint, and you truly believe that saint's aura is protecting your home and your family,
then taking practical physical precautions, like locking your doors or saving money for an emergency,
or building strong civic defenses, is viewed as a profound lack of faith.
It's an insult to the saint.
So practical security is shamed as spiritual cowardice.
Wow. And here's one that feels incredibly relevant. Wealth is synonymous with public corruption.
Because the economy is entirely based on the extraction of wealth through spiritual extortion.
Wealth isn't generated by innovation or fair trade or hard work.
It is generated by how effectively you can leverage the fear of the unseen to extract zakat or shrine offerings from the terrified masses.
So anyone who is vastly wealthy in this society is almost certainly involved in this corrupt, extractive, spiritual economy.
He also notes that sovereignty is reduced to just holding a government job.
Pride is treated as a crime.
And dignity and high-mindedness are dismissed as mere arrogance.
Let's look at that point about sovereignty. In a healthy, functioning society, true sovereignty and leadership belong to the visionaries, the scholars, the people of high moral standing and intellect.
But in a society where the spiritual realm is ruled entirely by corrupt charlatans and nepotistic lineages, the civic realm naturally follows suit.
Leadership just becomes a bureaucratic game of who can grab the administrative power to extract the most resources.
The entire concept of noble, selfless public service is dead.
Because the spiritual model of leadership they observe every day is inherently selfish and extractive.
The author is making a profound point here for anyone listening, regardless of your religious background or worldview.
Bad theology, or a deeply corrupted philosophical worldview, isn't just an abstract problem for academics to debate in ivory towers.
No, it ruins the real world.
It ruins the local economy, it ruins the justice system, it ruins how neighbors treat each other.
It's like installing a massive, state-of-the-art, multi-million-dollar security system on your house, complete with cameras and reinforced steel doors.
But then willingly giving the local burglar the master override code because he convinced you he's a security saint.
Yes, you have all the expensive architecture of safety, but absolutely none of the actual protection.
The system is fundamentally compromised from the inside.
That is a perfect analogy for the societal collapse the author is describing.
The architecture of the society might still look intact. They still have mosques, they still have titles, they still have leaders.
But the master override code has been handed over to charlatans.
And this perfectly synthesizes the text's ultimate overarching thesis.
The author's point from the very first page is that polytheism, or shirk, is not just the cartoonish, ancient act of bowing to a physical statue of stone.
That is a child's understanding of idolatry.
True idolatry is a highly adaptable virus.
It hides deep inside inner beliefs. It runs silently through spoken language and semantic rebrandings.
It manifests in the physical, ritualistic actions of the body, and it aggressively drains the financial and moral resources of the society.
It is a comprehensive, holistic system of societal degradation.
And what an incredible, intense journey this text has taken us on today.
We covered a lot of ground.
We really did. We started by looking at the terrifying mechanics of the information vacuum. How quickly the clouds of ignorance roll in to fill the void when true, rigorous scholarship is lost.
We examined the ingenious yet highly deceptive linguistic rebranding of faith.
Where modern followers engage in ancient practices but use sophisticated terms like algoth and tasrif to dodge the uncomfortable label of idolatry.
We unpacked the theological rationalization trap, where people attempt to justify deification by claiming cosmic power was merely delegated.
Only to find that history, sociology, and strict theology do not accept those semantic excuses.
We looked deeply into the sheer economics of it all, the elaborate domes, the shrines, the houses of guarantee.
And the blatant monetization of spiritual safety that perfectly echoed the indulgent sales of medieval Europe.
We walked step by step through the shocking, systematic hollowing out of the 5 pillars of Islam, where the outer rituals remained, but the internal reverence and fear were entirely redirected to human beings.
And finally, we saw the ultimate consequence, how this spiritual rot inevitably bleeds out into the streets, leading to the total inversion of civic virtues.
Where glory becomes tyranny and practical security is shamed as cowardice.
It is a heavy, monumental, and deeply challenging text.
And the author, clearly recognizing the immense emotional weight of the sociological analysis he has just laid out, ends his work not with more dry data or theological rulings,
but with a poignant, evocative appeal to the heart.
He shifts gears entirely away from sociology and concludes by citing 2 classic Arabic poems that beautifully summarize the emotional and spiritual core of his message.
I love when authors do this. They take all the academic rigor and distill it into art.
The first poem he quotes is by Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak, right?
Yes, it compares this whole process of societal decay to a slow asphyxiation.
Exactly. Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak wrote beautifully about the cumulative, deadly effect of small, seemingly insignificant compromises.
How does the poem go?
It translates roughly to, "I have seen that sins kill the hearts, and addiction to them inherits humiliation. And abandoning sins is life for the hearts, and it is better for your soul to disobey them."
That's powerful.
He is conveying that the spiritual death of a person or an entire society doesn't happen all at once in a grand explosion.
It is a slow, quiet asphyxiation by 1,000 small daily compromises.
Which leads right into the second poem, which is a perfect capstone for everything we've discussed today.
Yes, the final quote is from Ibn Amutaz, who provides one of the most famous and striking definitions of piety, or taqwa, in the entire Arabic literary tradition.
He writes, "Leave sins, the small of them and the great, for that is piety, and act like one walking over a land of thorns, cautious of what he sees."
It is the powerful idea of moving through your life and moving through your belief system, acutely awake, feeling every single step,
And refusing to just blindly follow the herd into the briar patch.
cautious of what he sees. That is such a vivid, demanding image.
It really makes you think.
And I want to speak directly to you, the listener, right now, based on the very final, piercing line of that poem by Ibn al-Mutaz.
He ends his definition of piety by saying, "Do not despise a small sin. Mountains are made of pebbles."
I want you to take that metaphor completely out of the ancient theological context we've been discussing today, and I want you to apply it directly to your own modern life.
It applies everywhere.
Look around at your own society, your own industry, your own personal relationships, or your own philosophical belief systems. What are the small pebbles that you are currently stepping over without thinking?
Are they unquestioned traditions that you just accept because your parents did?
Are they subtle, slow shifts in the language and the definitions of words constantly used by the media or your political leaders?
Are they tiny, seemingly harmless compromises in what you know deep down to be true, just to keep the peace, avoid an argument, and stay comfortable?
Because the terrifying, undeniable lesson of this text, whether you agree with its theology or not, is that these things never, ever stay small.
The vacuum always demands to be filled.
If you leave those subtle shifts unchecked, if you casually allow the dictionary of your values to be rewritten one word at a time, what kind of massive, immovable mountain of completely altered reality might those pebbles build in your own life or in our society decades from now?
When you wake up 30 years from now, will you even recognize the landscape?
Thank you so much for joining us on this incredible deep dive into the mechanics of belief, the power of language, and the crisis of ignorance. Stay curious, stay cautious of the thorns, and we will see you next time.